Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles, and today's battle features somebody that you may have heard of if you follow the excellent ship reviews by Little White Mouse on the World of Warships North American official forums. This is Lert, native of the Netherlands and frequent contributor to Little White Mouse's reviews. Lert is in a Tier 10 domination battle on the North map, with an active thunderstorm front moving across the map from west to east, in the Tier 9 Japanese battleship the Musashi, sister ship to the legendary Yamato. The Musashi is basically a Tier 9 Yamato. There are some differences, but it's the similarities that make the ship special. Because what you get here at Tier 9 is exactly the same amount of hit points as a Tier 10 Yamato, and exactly the same armour layout as the Tier 10 Yamato. Now that does of course mean that the Musashi shares the same armour vulnerabilities as the Yamato, those cheek weak spots in the bows. But she does also have the Yamato's best in-game torpedo damage reduction, which is kind of ironic when you consider how she was sunk. But more on that in a moment. Both ships are armed with the Yamato's 18.1-inch guns, although this is where we start to see some of the differences, because while the Yamato has best in-game 2.1 Sigma for its 18.1-inch shells, the Musashi only has a Sigma rating of 1.8. Both ships have the same dispersion on their guns, but the Musashi has worse Sigma, and Sigma rating affects how likely it is that your shots are going to have tight grouping, or how likely it is that some or more of your shots are going to wander off towards the outer limits of the dispersion rating. So with the Yamato, you're more likely to get nice tight shot groupings, but with the Musashi, you're more likely for the shots to wander apart slightly. But that's a relatively small price to pay for having the Yamato's guns, torpedo protection, armour and hit points, except one tier lower. A much more significant price to pay is the Musashi's absolutely atrociously bad anti-aircraft defence, meaning this ship is vulnerable to even, well, Tier 8 carriers like the Shikaku on the enemy team here. She does still have these guns though, which means you're able to do things like that. To enemy Tier 10 battleships at ranges of 21.6 kilometers, which is kind of nice. Still, it's kind of funny that they've chosen to nerf the already unimpressive anti-aircraft firepower of the Yamato to produce this Tier 9 version of the Musashi. I mean, I get it, I understand that you can't just clone a ship from Tier 10, slap it in at Tier 9 and call it done without giving it some kind of nerfs to compensate, but, well, in reality the Musashi's anti-aircraft firepower was heavily augmented after she'd been torpedoed by an American submarine in 1944 and had returned to Japan for repairs. Although at the same time she was sunk by aircraft in much the same way that the more famous sister ship the Yamato was. During the Battle of the Leyte Gulf, the Musashi was part of the task force that was supposed to attack the American invasion forces in the Philippines through the Surigao Strait, but the Musashi never made it that far. The Japanese task force was spotted, and American carrier-based aircraft inflicted an estimated 19 torpedo and bomb hits on the Musashi, which unsurprisingly inflicted more than enough damage to sink her. If she had survived this disaster, however, it's unlikely that she would have fared much better in the days that followed, as part of Admiral Nishimura's southern force attempting to link up through the Surigao Straits with Admiral Kurita's force attacking from the other direction, she was met during the night by Admiral Jesse Oldendorf's battleship line, which consisted of the 6 battleships West Virginia, Maryland, Mississippi, Tennessee, California and Pennsylvania, most of whom were Pearl Harbor veterans, as well as the heavy cruisers Louisville, Portland, Minneapolis, and Her Majesty's Australian ship Shropshire, 4 light cruisers Denver, Columbia, Phoenix and Boise, and 28 destroyers and 39 motor torpedo boats. Against this, Nishimura's survivors consisted of the old battleships Yamashiro and Fuso, the heavy cruiser Mogami, and the 4 destroyers Shigur, Michisio, Asugamo and Yamagumo. Traditionally, the Japanese did very well during night battles. They trained extensively for it, but at this stage of the war, so did the Americans. And the Americans had fire control radar. The Japanese ships never even saw the ships that were shooting at them. By the time the guns had stopped firing, Nishimura's force consisted of 1 survivor, the badly damaged destroyer Shiguri. All of which was doubly bad news for the crew of the Musashi, over half of whom had been rescued from her sinking because they were rescued by ships that were destined to be sunk barely days later during the Battle of the Surigao Strait. Meanwhile, Lerts already gotten his name on the scoreboard, sinking the enemy Talon with a detonation, although the team had lost a Megami of their own due to a rocket attack from the enemy Shikaku. The enemy team have also lost a Kagero, who managed to get himself torpedoed, most embarrassingly by a Fletcher, although not before he got his own torpedoes away and managed to sink the friendly Albemarle. So both teams are down 2 ships, although Lerts' team are down a pair of Tier 8 cruisers, the enemy team are down 1 Tier 8 cruiser and 1 Tier 8 destroyer. Now, if you take a closer look at the minimap, you'll note that Lert is well inside. Oh dear, oh come on, no, surely he's never going to get the guns around in time. No, that would have been glorious, but it was never going to happen. But yes, Lert is well inside this thunderstorm front that's moving across the map from west to east, and this gives him a number of advantages. First, the traditional spotted for 20 seconds thanks to increased detection range after firing your guns is only 7 seconds if you're inside the thunderstorm front. So ordinarily Lert would fire his guns and then he'd be visible to anybody within 26.5 kilometers because that's the range of his guns for a full 20 seconds, but inside a thunderstorm front only 7 seconds, and then your visibility drops back down to your default spotting range, except inside a thunderstorm front his default spotting range is reduced by a further 20%. 10% for destroyers, 20% for everything else. As well as that, the maximum dispersion of any shells fired into the storm area is increased by a factor of 1.3, so increased dispersion at targets located inside the weather system. In fact, the only real downside to being inside a thunderstorm front like this is that your maximum absolute spotting range is decreased to 30 kilometers, but you can't shoot at anybody 30 kilometers away anyway, so it's not really that much of a big deal. Now, this is where Lert suffers his first real brown alert moment. He's just unleashed a salvo at the Thunderer off in the distance, attempting to finish what he started with the Citadel that he scored on him earlier, when the enemy Östergötland suddenly appears. And that's bad news. Most battleships, and the Musashi is no exception, don't come with a broad range of consumables, and unless you're German you definitely don't get hydro, so he can only hope that the Östergötland's torpedoes were fired, and they were, at the Yugamo over there instead, so that's a bit of a relief. The Östergötland is down. Is that going to be good enough to save the Yugamo? He's no longer spotting him. Oh, no, not quite. He was on fire. Right. Both teams are now down 4 ships. And both teams also hold 1 capture point apiece, although the enemy team are substantially further ahead on points because they've controlled the central cap at Bravo for pretty much the entire game. And Lert's team took a good 5 minutes before they managed to achieve domination of one of the cap points, in this case capture point Alpha. The enemy team, however, are busy flipping control of capture point Charlie, so they are ahead on points, and they're going to go further ahead on points unless somebody can do something about it. And we do love it when enemy battleships cross our T, sailing a very predictable course because they want to avoid the torpedoes fired at them, and with their guns pointing in the wrong direction and unable to return fire, although Lert's unable to get more than 1 salvo off against the enemy Sovietsky Soyuz as he sails into cover beyond the side of the island there. So that was nice. He's up to 121,000 damage done, although still only the 1 kill. And the enemy team really are starting to surge ahead on points here. But Lert is going to be doing something about that. As the team loses yet another heavy cruiser, Lert is about to slip over the border of capture point Bravo. In the biggest battleship that the world has ever seen, he's flipping a cap, and he's doing it undetected. What, pray tell, are the 2 surviving friendly destroyers doing? You'd think that a destroyer would be jumping all over the opportunity to snatch an uncontested capture point, but no, both the Fletcher and the Kagero are doing their level best to get themselves killed going up against the biggest concentration of enemy ships remaining on the map, including at least 1 radar cruiser. It turns out that sometimes a battleship's just got to do what a destroyer should be doing because the destroyers just don't seem to want to do it. Now, I was actually quite surprised that Lert took this shot against the Thunderer. I mean, he obviously wants to kill the Thunderer and finish off the spanking that he gave him earlier, but at the same time, firing is giving his position away. and he's in the middle of capping, and he really doesn't want to get reset. But, well, then again, I suppose it's a fairly calculated risk because he's in the thunderstorm, so he only stays spotted afterwards for 7 seconds, not 20 seconds. So he's gotten away with it, and he's flipped the cap successfully. But that's when he gets hydroed. And that's very disturbing, because hydro doesn't have the same range as radar, which means that there's somebody pretty damn close. And that's when his secondary gun batteries suddenly start opening up on the starboard side, which means somebody is very, very close indeed. And he's just fired against the Thunderer, which of course means his guns are all reloading, and that's when he suddenly realises that he's well inside torpedo range of an Edinburgh. Oh shit. The fact that the Edinburgh's on his starboard side is double bad news, because, well, the guns have now reloaded, but they're not even in a position to shoot at the Edinburgh, who's missed his first torpedo launch, and missed from a range of less than 3 kilometres, which is pretty impressive. But he's swinging around to have a go from the other side. Lerts' guns are reloaded, but he fails to find the Edinburgh's citadel, and this is where a bunch of things happen all at once. First, the Edinburgh gets his torpedoes away, and Lert takes all 3 of them right in the bows. Then he rams the Edinburgh, somehow manages to survive, earning himself the Die Hard award in the process, but his secondaries are still firing, and that's when he kills the Cleveland that he probably didn't even know was there, earning himself a Close Quarters Expert award and double strike medal to go with the Die Hard that he just picked up on the Edinburgh. Of course, the Thunderer's still shooting at him with its 18-inch guns, probably still upset about the citadel that he suffered earlier, and that's when Lert runs into one of the, in fact, the only surviving enemy destroyer. Initially, I was thinking it's a good job the Cleveland is sinking where it is, because that's going to block any torpedoes that the destroyer's going to have launched. But hang on a second, it's a Friesland. It doesn't have torpedoes anyway. And if you have to choose between getting shot at by a Thunderer or getting shot at by a Friesland, Lert's going to pick a Friesland any day of the week. The Friesland has popped his smoke, but he's within 2 kilometres, so the smoke isn't going to help him if he's going to keep shooting. Lert can of course still see him, and I think it's at this point where the Friesland decides, screw it, no guts, no glory, chicks dig scars anyway, and glory lasts forever. Guns the engine, goes to ramming speed, and Lert gets his second second Close Quarters Expert badge of the day, to go with the high caliber that he just picked up for scoring 177,000 damage so far. But we're not out of the woods yet. There's an enemy Odin up ahead, and yes, it does have torpedoes. Right now, Lert is kissing his torpedo damage protection bulges. I have no idea how he's managed to survive this far. But the Odin, presumably thinking to himself, I'd have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for that pesky Musashi's torpedo damage protection. While the Thunderer continues to rain 18-inch shells down on him from behind, the Odin, swinging around, trying to get the torpedoes away from the other side, decides at the last moment that he's not going to make it, goes for the ram, denied! Look at how close it was! Holy shit! And there's the Confederate award to go with the Die Hard, the double close... You know what, I've lost track. I've lost track of the amount of awards that Lerts Musashi has earned in the space of the last 3 minutes. But, you know, for the sake of argument, let's at least try. So since he spotted the Edinburgh, that's Die Hard, 2 Close Quarter Expert awards, Confederate, High Caliber, Kraken Unleashed, and Double Strike. That's pretty impressive by anybody's standards. How he is still alive, I have no idea. Chat's also been getting pretty spicy. Pretty much since the start of this battle, and unrelated to anything that Lert's done. But there is at least a very well-deserved, well-played Musashi there from the captain of the Edinburgh, where this whole thing started, who has been following Lert's progress for the course of the last couple of minutes. Oh, and there's the second detonation of this match. Well, the second one that I've noticed anyway, from the Kagero, doing a drive-by on the enemy North Carolina. Where is the... there he is. Okay. Lert's team, thanks to that just almighty scuffle in the middle of the map, are finally ahead on points. But the enemy team do still control 2 of the caps, and it looks likely that the Thunderer, who has been attracting quite a bit of criticism from his team in chat, and who Lert has basically been ignoring because he didn't see him as much of a threat, it looks likely that the Thunderer is at least going to attempt to flip Central Cap Bravo. And there are still live enemy ships blocking the approaches to the 2 other cap circles at Alpha and Charlie. But while Lert is swinging the ship around and turning to face the Thunder, I'd just like to draw your attention down to the southwest corner of the minimap, where an enemy San Luis is sneaking well, he's not really sneaking. He's obviously spotted, and the Lexington clearly knows that he's coming because he's expending wave after wave of aircraft on him, while sitting in the same spot behind the island and just hoping that the San Luis isn't going to realise where all of these aircraft are coming from. Do you remember, and we're going back a couple of years here, so we'll see how long some of you have been following the channel, but way back, I featured a World of Warships battle where there was a guy in an aircraft carrier, I think his name was OCX or something, was doing exactly this, just sitting there as enemy ships closed in on his position, completely ignoring the advice from his teammates to get his ass out of there, and eventually responded in chat by saying he didn't need to move his aircraft carrier because he had planes and the planes moved. do you remember that? Yeah. The more things change, the more they stay the same, and those shots streaking out from the centre of the map are really bad news for the friendly Richelieu, because the enemy Thunderer has finally managed to get his name on the scoreboard, and the enemy San Luis, who's on 4 kills, is about to earn himself a Kraken, in a move that absolutely everybody saw coming except for the Lexington, who apparently didn't understand that his WASD keys did slightly more than just move his aircraft around the map. So despite all of Lert's efforts, the enemy team are ahead on points once again, and are the only team who currently control any of the cap circles, although the friendly Kagero is doing his level best to reverse that situation after sinking the enemy Sovietsky Soyuz and is flipping capture point Charlie. The friendly Odin is closing in on the location of the enemy San Luis, who just scored himself a Kraken Unleashed, which means Lert is closing in on what must be the enemy Thunderer, because somebody is flipping that central cap, and it's definitely not the San Luis all the way down there to the southwest. Now this is a dangerous moment for a Musashi, coming around the corner of an island when you know that there's something with big guns waiting for you on the other side, because the Musashi shares the limitations of the Yamato's armour scheme. Those cheeks underneath the front turrets are very vulnerable to fire. Ideally, when you're approaching somebody in one of these ships, you want to be doing it nose in, rather than angling the way somebody else would do in a similar ship, and the way that you would be able to do coming around the corner of an island, but which you can't do unless you're doing some pretty extreme Tokyo drifting in a battleship like the Musashi or the Yamato. But he's got the Thunderer, and his guns are pointing the wrong way. Lert trying to swing the nose around, because you have to bow tank with the Yamato. If you try to angle, you expose the cheeks and you get citadel from the front. And he's just managed to do it in time, and there you go. 18-inch guns, not 18.1-inch guns, cannot overmatch 32mm of bow armour. Something that the Musashi's guns, because they've got that extra 0.1 of an inch, can absolutely do, and which he pretty much just did there. That just leaves the San Luis down to the south, but the Odin's closing in on him, which is a real shame for that San Luis, because he absolutely was the MVP on the enemy team with 5 kills to his name. The Odin has significantly more health than the San Luis had the last time we saw him, and also has the advantage of torpedoes, and of course, yep, he spotted him. Meanwhile, Lert, I think, is done for this game. He'll take a shot at the San Luis if the situation presents itself, but for now I think he's entirely happy after scoring his 6th kill and more medals than anybody has any right to, without being accused of just being vulgar and showing off. But he's going to add another capture ribbon, although, well, I don't know, is he going to get the shot? I don't think he's even going to get the guns around, but there's the capture ribbon before the Odin finishes that guy off, although maybe, nope, it was not to be. So Lert, proudly representing the Netherlands in the Musashi. Replay submitted by Canada's very own Little White Mouse. Thank you so much to the two of you for bringing this particular battle to my and everybody else's attention. I'm very happy to share it, because it was epic. I hope you all enjoyed it, and as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.